Hey everyone, I have some interesting news today, and I say interesting because on the surface it feels like a step in the right direction, but I have thoughts. The long and short of it is that today, August, wow, where's my head? The long and short of it is that today, October 14th, 2025, Meta has announced that it will be releasing an update to how their teen accounts work. Previously, it was somewhat ambiguous, but essentially it aimed to restrict and control the type of content that teens were exposed to on their platform. However, to my knowledge, they never really expanded on what criteria was being used to determine what kind of content would be controlled and or restricted. Now, on the surface, it might seem like something that's self explanatory, and we'll get into that later, but this new update seeks to provide clarity on it. So the new restrictions will follow the PG-13 TV rating that was created by the Motion Picture Association. I'm personally not clear on how this change is going to affect the type of content being shown to teens because the PG label on a film or TV show just means that a parent should use caution regarding the content and that parents are encouraged to vet the content before exposing their kid to it. I mean, PG literally stands for parental guidance. And any of us that grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s probably remember that disclaimer that played before basically every movie. Parental guidance is advised. In today's climate, though, it's kind of absurd to suggest that a parent could vet even a fraction of what is available to kids, but we'll get more into that later. Based on what I've read, this is supposedly a stricter measure that will allow Meta to more effectively protect teens on their platforms. So, all that said, let's get some facts. Teen accounts were introduced to Instagram sometime in September 2024, so last year. I was not avidly keeping up with this last year, so please feel free to correct me on anything, fact check me on anything else in this video. Teen accounts were launched to give parents some control over over what content their children were exposed to, and as a response to growing pressure that there weren't basically any protections for children on their platform in regard to age inappropriate content. Some features that were introduced on these teen accounts were created for users aged 18 or younger. A private account was the default setting for these teen accounts. This meant that users had to accept new followers. People who don't follow them can't see their content or interact with them. These accounts had the strictest messaging system, so only allowing people they follow or are already connected to message them. And these accounts automatically have the strictest content restrictions, limiting content such as violence, gore, obscenity, and body image content such as eating disorders or the promotion of cosmetic procedures. Remember that last point regarding obscenity and cosmetic procedures. That's important. Teen accounts also defaulted to the most restrictive anti-bullying features. They had a sleep mode that you could turn that automatically turned on between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. every day. That muted notifications and that sort of thing. And there was also a supervision feature that allowed parents to receive updates and insights into what content their child was accessing and or being presented by the app's algorithm. This is not a comprehensive list of what teen accounts were doing, but these were the features that came up the most while I was doing my research. Um, as I mentioned a few times, most of these were default settings when setting up a teen account. And from what I read, setting one up as a parent for your kid was relatively straightforward. On a teen account, setting changes had to be approved by a parent. This part I am a little bit fuzzy on because I couldn't find like a specific system for how that worked. My guess is that as a parent, you would set a passcode that had to be entered whenever a setting wanted to be changed, and that passcode would have to be entered anytime a setting was changed. But if you know how it works, let me know in the comments. To quickly backtrack, teen accounts released sometime in September 2024. However, it was only available on Instagram. It wasn't rolled out to Facebook and Facebook Messenger until recently, September 25th of this year, 2025. So about a year after Instagram got it. So that brings us to today. Now, I want to start with saying credit where credit is due. This was a sentiment I saw a lot of when I was going back and looking up reactions when the idea of teen accounts was first introduced. However, I mean, on its face, I agree. Any step towards protecting kids is 100% a step in the right direction. Any amount of protections added is good. I'm on board with that. But here's why I say on its face. Is content really being restricted? And to some degree, this will get political. But like I said before, PG just means parental guidance is advised. It doesn't necessarily mean that access to the content is restricted. Now, there is an argument to be made that if you were a 13-year-old going to the movies, well, not a 13, well, 12, 13-year-old, if you were a younger kid going to the movies back in the day, you would need to be escorted essentially by a parent, or a parent would have to give permission for you to purchase those tickets. In that scenario, the person selling the ticket would be sort of like a vetting agent so that you wouldn't be able to gain access to the questionable content without a parent approving. So I guess in this new environment, Instagram, Meta, Facebook is acting like that ticket sales agent, but I'm going to get more into that in a second. I think I think that very few people will argue that on-screen murder, of which there is plenty of in today's climate, is not appropriate for young audiences. So I think in that regard, that would be effectively quote unquote gate kept by the ticket agent. However, the number of things that have universal support is dwindling. Everything from tattoos and body piercings to plastic surgery and trans care is hyper politicized, varies from parent to parent, and is now ambiguous as far as to what content the ticket agent is required to get parental consent for. And this is kind of an important topic, especially when you talk about implementing a PG-13 guide for social media. To compound this problem, the organization that dictates the TV rating system, the Motion Picture Association, is not an unbiased or bipartisan organization. That certainly impacts how the guide is constructed. My opinion, we know that the media and Hollywood leans left. The left largely is pushing for certain content to be accessible to children, particularly trans and gender ideology. Remember when I said teen accounts would limit access to obscenity and promotion of cosmetic procedures? This type of content typically includes drag shows for kids, gender affirming care, such as puberty blockers and surgery. We can certainly get into the weeds about the impact of this content, but my opinion is that if there is any disagreement at all, any question about the impact of such content, then we should err on the side of caution. On the flip side, though, The PG rating and even the PG rating doesn't specifically say that content isn't appropriate for certain age groups. It only says the content may not be appropriate and that parental guidance is advised. And like I said at the beginning, it's practically impossible for a parent to vet even a small fraction of the content available today. So, all that said, my question is, will this updated restriction rule effectively change anything? Given the culture wars and the vice grip the left has on the media, I firmly have to say no. Not only will it not change anything, but it will actively be thrown in parents' faces. And we've already seen that happen before, where they will just be told that they need to be more aware and vet the content that their kids are exposed to. Now, I'm not absolving parents of responsibility here, but I do think that parents have an extraordinarily difficult job nowadays. And what used to be packaged as help in the form of the TV guide rating, it's now nothing more than a liability disclaimer. So, I mean, it's just so tough, I feel, to look. I think on its face, this is a good idea, even a great idea for kids. But I don't think that this will ultimately make a difference unless the culture changes. If you disagree, let's talk.